Hello, class, and welcome to our reading review of Hamlet, Act 2, Scene 1. Okay, so this scene opens with Polonius essentially telling Reynaldo to go to France and spy on Laertes. A couple of interesting lines in Act 2, Scene 1 from Polonius to Reynaldo. If you look on page 78, for those of you that have the print version, those of you reading electronically, it's Act 2, Scene 1, line 37. He says, "Marry, sir, here's my drift." And I believe it is a fetch of wit. Now, drift, whenever you say, I got your drift, I'm catching your drift, it's interesting that that modern expression, we find it here in Shakespeare. Someone says, "You catching my drift?" And essentially that's what he's saying. Let me tell you what I'm thinking, right? And when you say, "I'm catching your drift," you're saying, "I understand what you're thinking." Um, but essentially, he kind of tells him to spy on him. Line 65, he says, "By indirections, find directions out." So he's essentially telling him to be a little bit shady. And it's interesting because Polonius himself is not afraid to be shady. He's not afraid to spy and to, in some ways, meddle. Again, there's two ways to look at him telling Ophelia to cut Hamlet off, to not talk to him, to not see him, to not hang out with him anymore. One, he's a father trying to protect his daughter, or two, is he maybe getting too involved in his daughter's personal life? We could look at it from both perspectives. More to come on that, though. So after he tells Polonius to go spy on Laertes, essentially, and find out what he's up to in France, make sure he's not getting into trouble, Ophelia comes in and basically tells her father that Hamlet broke into her room and assaulted her, for lack of better words, right? Physically, and some scholars think this might be a sexual assault. Remember, she will not speak with him, she will not receive his letters, she will not see him. So what does he do? Right? And Polonius thinks Hamlet is mad for Ophelia's love. He feels his unrequited love, that she doesn't love him anymore, that she won't hang out with him, has driven him to act crazy. Now we know, because Hamlet tells his friends at the end of Act 1, Scene 5, that he's going to put on an antic disposition and start acting crazy to test what the ghost told him, because he's not sure if he can trust the ghost. Remember, this is back in a time where they didn't have detectives, they didn't have, um, CSI investigations. He can't go up and ask Claudius. He can't call the police. He's got to find out whether or not the ghost was telling him the truth before he commits, right, to getting his revenge on Claudius, because this is a big deal. If he kills Claudius and Claudius isn't guilty, then Hamlet himself is no better than the supposed murderer that Claudius is, and he'll be going down to hell as well instead of up to heaven. So she tells him, I mean, if you look at the language, he took me by the wrist and held me hard, right? I'm on line 87, Act 2, Scene 1. Then goes he to the length of all his arm, and with his other hand thus over his brow, he falls to such a perusal of my face as he would draw it. So he grabs her wrist and shakes her, and then just stares at her. Long stayed he so, at last a little shaking of mine arm, and thrice his head thus waving up and down, he raised a sigh so piteous and profound as it did seem to shatter all his bulk, and end his being. That done, he lets me go, and with his head over his shoulders turned, he seemed to find his way without his eyes. Now, take into account. So he grabs her, he shakes her, he stares at her, he lets out a groan, and then he kind of walks out the door backwards. You may say, okay, definitely does sound like he's assaulting her, but where do these critics get the possibility of a sexual assault? Well, Look at what she says before that, right? Lines 77, Act 2, Scene 1. My lord, as I was sewing in my closet, Lord Hamlet with his doublet all unbraced, no hat upon his head, his stockings fouled, ungartered, and down jivied to his ankle, pale as his shirt, his knees knocking each other, and with a look so piteous in purport, as if he had been loosed out of hell to speak of horrors, he comes before me. Think about the facts, right? A closet is her room. So she's sewing in her room, and he comes in with his shirt open, no hat on his head, his stockings, right? His pants, ungartered and down jivied to his ankle. So his shirt is open, his pants are around his ankles, and he doesn't have a hat on. And he's pale, his knees are locking together, and he looks like he came from hell. All facts, all words. So if you were to analyze this scene and you wanted to make inferences about what occurred, you would use the facts to support those inferences, much like you're going to do in 2F when you take the facts and details and examples from the story of an hour to support your inference about Louise Mallard and the ending. So, right, Polonius says on page 84, Act 2, Scene 1, line 111, right after she says, he says, well, did you do as I told? And she says, yes, I denied all access. I repelled his letters. I haven't talked to him. And what does Polonius say? That hath made him mad. I am sorry that with better heed and judgment, I had not quoted him. He kind of actually says, well, maybe I was wrong in telling you to no longer have contact with him. I feared he bid but trifle and meant to wreck thee. Again, he thought that Hamlet just wanted to sleep with her, that his love wasn't genuine. Now, this is a very interesting line here, and this kind of ends Act 2, Scene 1. He says, as he continues, it's the last part of Act 2, Scene 1. He says, but beshrew my jealousy. Now, jealousy is when you're afraid someone's going to take something away from you. So he's kind of he feels jealous that maybe his daughter would be taken away from Hamlet by Hamlet. By heaven, it is as proper to our age to cast beyond ourselves in our opinions as it is common for the younger sort to lack discretion. He's saying it's very common for, right, in our own opinions, meaning older people, to do what? To maybe think they know more than they do and kind of meddle in other people's affairs. I'm older and wiser, so I'm going to tell you what to do. Again, is he trying to protect his daughter? I think so, but maybe does he get too involved in her affairs with Hamlet? And he kind of admits that he's wrong here. So this is a very, very interesting scene. But what does Polonius do? He continues, right, to feel as though he's right, and he tells the king and queen, I think Hamlet's acting crazy because of unrequited love, right? And he tells Ophelia, let's go tell the king and queen. So stay tuned. Thank you for your patience. More to come. Act 2, Scene 2 video review coming up.